very much, Chrissy, and thank you, Jan, for inviting me along. I'm your warm-up act for today, and I'm going to get the energy moving with my cautionary tale of how great Feng Shui can do wonderful things for your business, but bad Feng Shui can precipitate business disaster. So it's easy, of course, to post-rationalize, but sometimes when you look back at things that happened and you think this is more than just a coincidence. So hopefully you'll find this story interesting. And it's the story of my first business, Red Letter Days, which I started back in 1989 when I was 24 years old. And I started it from scratch with nothing more than just the seed of an idea to create a company which offered experiences as gifts. So things like motor racing at Brands Hatch and health spa days, and we packaged them in a red letter, and that was the gift, and that was just the seed of the idea. I literally nurtured it from nothing, and I grew it into a successful business, which by 1996 was turning over £1 million. So it's a nice business, but it wasn't a huge business. And by that point, we had this whole range of hundreds of different experiences, and by that point, I'd personally experienced loads of them. I'd been to Venice on the Orient Express, I'd flown in a hot air balloon, I'd even jumped out of an aeroplane strapped to a guy from 18,000 feet. And I thought, well, actually, why don't we experience our Feng Shui experience, which was delivered by a lady called Sarah Shorty. I don't think Sarah's here today, but she is a Feng Shui consultant who has written for the Daily Mail. She even had a program on QVC. She's written several books on the subject. And so she was our Feng Shui consultant who delivered our experiences. So I thought, well, I'll get her into Red Letter Days and get her opinion on what we should do. Now, this was well before I understood anything about energy work and before I understood about how the universe works. So I was just a business person. I was just kind of, you know, you do business and you put in a lot of hard work and you get a lot of results. And I later had discovered, this just to preface this, I now realize that actually everything is energy. We live in a very energetic universe. There's very little matter in our universe because an atom is just simply a sort of proton with this charged electron whizzing around it. And the interesting thing is if you scale that up, it's equivalent of a cat swinging a bumblebee on a half-mile rope. That's how much matter there is in the universe, the cat and the bumblebee, and a half-mile of nothing in between. So there's actually very little matter in our universe. And also, the other interesting thing is that energy moves in spirals. Spirals are the building blocks of the universe. If you look at all the forms of nature, and even if you look at the way that planets and the solar system works, even light bends through space. So this idea of energy moving in spirals is really fundamental to the way that things should be in a natural, harmonious environment. But of course, mankind loves to build in straight lines, and it's actually quite a masculine way of doing stuff because the spiral is very feminine, whereas men like to go straight from A to B. And I was actually an alpha female, so that was my way of doing things. Right, I want this and I'm going to get it and I don't care what's in my way. And that's very much how I was when I started out in business. So that's just a kind of bit of a background to how I now realize things work, but at the time I had no idea about any of this. So I was just very open to Sarah coming in and giving her input. And I went along with it, but I didn't really understand it, the fundamentals of it. And I probably didn't really take it as seriously as maybe I now do. So just to illustrate some of the changes that Sarah suggested that we make, and what I've had to do, because I don't have any actual photos of our office at the time, because this is quite a few years ago, I've actually found some stock library shots just to illustrate the kind of thing that I meant. So our business was very much a mail order company, and when you opened the front doors to our office, you just entered this huge open plan call center with loads of people doing admin, and it was just hundreds of people at loads of desks, really open plan, and loads of activity, almost like chaotic activity going on. So one of the things that we did, and I've constructed this photo, I hope you can see, we created this sort of reception area, which was kind of like a holding area for the energy. So when you came in front of you, there was the logo, there was some plants, there was the receptionist, and then nice seating. We put a circle of, in the carpet, which kind of, the whole idea is to kind of, rather than energy coming straight in and through a building, is you create a holding area where the energy can sort of dwell and then move on. So it kind of slows down the energy, but it also creates an amazing uplifting feeling if you've got that wonderful sort of, they call bright hall effect, I think, where you walk into a building and your spirit and your energy is uplifted. So that was one of the things that we did. Also, a lot of our teams, we'd sat them where everyone was sort of facing a wall with their computer and their backs were all towards one another, so that the teams couldn't actually see one another. And I see it so many times when I visit businesses, people working at computers. But if a team can't make eye contact, then you don't get a great team spirit building. So we altered the way that the teams were sat, and we actually got great eye contact working. We also made it safe for people. So a lot of those people who are working at those screens had their back to what was going on. So if I'm standing here and I'm talking to you, or I'm working away, I feel very vulnerable when I've got lots of activity and I can't see it. It feels very dangerous. So just by moving people so they feel really safe against a wall is just a really simple thing you can do to make people feel really safe and confident and secure in their jobs. And by the same principle, if you ever go into a power business meeting, always sit at the seat where you've got the wall behind you and you can see the door, because that's the power seat in the room. The other thing we did was clearing clutter. And I personally have a huge problem with clutter. I have, our office reflected me, my energy, and my mum grew up with a very strict father during the sort of war, and nothing ever got thrown away. And when I was growing up, every drawer was stuffed with bits of string and little bits of things which maybe one day would come in useful. And so I'm really have got that kind of can't throw anything away. And that was reflected in our office. We kept everything, just didn't want to throw anything away. And I was just so anal about everything, picking up paper clips off the floor, going through staff's bins to see what they, thrown sheets of half-used labels away and keeping them. So we ended up with a lot of clutter, which results in kind of stuck energy. So we really had to brace ourselves and try and clear the clutter and get to a nice clean environment and clean minimalist environment. And so we implemented all this stuff, and I was completely open, and I took it all on board and implemented all these changes. And the business really took off. And we literally went from 1 million to 3 million to 5 million to 10 million within a really short space of time. The business literally exploded. All sorts of amazing new opportunities started to flow, and everything started to open up. And just interesting stuff that happened during that time. I just was thinking on the way here about, I decided one autumn, in the run-up to Christmas, I decided that we would erect this huge Christmas tree in our fame sector, right? Huge Christmas tree, lights all over it, nice red baubles, because obviously red activates fame, and that also it was our company colour. And literally within 3 weeks, I had my very first television appearance, live on Watchdog, facing Anne Robinson, having to explain some of the problems of our growth, because we were growing too fast and we didn't have the systems to cope with it. So even though all this growth started to happen, actually sometimes in a business when you grow too fast, it actually makes you quite vulnerable. And we got to the point where we were really successful business. Success was setting in. We were making £1 million profit a year, so it was a very good business. But at the same time, in about 2000, while this was all happening, our lease came up for review, and we thought it would be no problem to renew it, but then at the 11th hour it fell through, and the landlord basically said, you've got literally weeks to vacate. And I'd left my finance director sorting this out, and we were suddenly plunged into panic mode. And so classic alpha female, right, we've got a problem, I'm going to sort it. So I went out and said, right, let's find this new home for our business. And I found this amazing office in Muswell Hill with these wonderful views over the whole of the city of London. And so, great, we're going to move in. And I didn't stop and think, let's just get some advice on this. Let's get Sarah back in. So I just, like the alpha female, straight from A to B, let's just sort it and get it done. So we moved into this big office right next to Alexandra Palace on the top of Muswell Hill. And if you know anything about Alexandra Palace, it's had disaster after disaster. And I now realize that being on this exposed space on the very top of a hill is really terrible feng shui, because actually what you want to be is kind of nestling in the valley where the energy is gathering, and that's where the energy gathers in London around the river. The interesting thing as well, because I did get Sarah Shorty in, and later Simon Brown also came with some of his students to do a case study and also checked our geopathic stress. And when Sarah came to see us, and she's like, oh my God, well, she didn't quite say that, but I could tell. It was like, oh no. One of the very first things she said to me was, what happened to the company who was in here before? And I said, oh, they were taken over. And she said, yeah, but did they want to be taken over? And she really picked up precisely on this predecessor chi, because whatever happened to the company in that building before is a thing that is going to manifest itself again and again unless you do the kind of space clearing work. So fighting against this negative predecessor chi is quite a thing to fight against, because you're fighting against the flow of the river. And the other thing was geopathic stress, and that's what Simon Brown specializes in. And when he checked the building, we didn't just have one bit of geopathic stress. We had 9 different channels of geopathic stress running all over this building. I mean, it's like me. I just don't do things to smart. Everything I do is absolutely to excess. Can't just have one little bit of geopathic stress. So in essence, this building had hugely negative feng shui things running through it. And there's a limit to how much you can cure with wind chimes and stuff. I don't want to belittle, but there's a limit to how many fixes you can do if you've got major problems with a site.